Today I'm testing the Pylon Jasper Monitor 18, a high-end bookshelf speaker out of Poland that's part of Pylon's flagship series. These are premium two-way monitors using a ScanSpeak tweeter and an 18cm midwoofer, also sourced from ScanSpeak. Let's talk about the build quality of this speaker. I gotta say that I think it looks quite nice. Now the speaker that I was loaned retails for about €39.50. If you want some of their other more readily available colors, you can get them for about €29.50 for the pair. And you can see they have a lot of different colorways on their website here. And again, ranging from €29.50 to €39.50 per pair. In my listening session, what I found was that at low volumes, this speaker really stands out above other speakers. There's a lot of extra mid-bass thump, and there's more attack in the frequency response in that 2 kilohertz area. So it's going to make instruments really jump out at you. There also is a direct high frequency lift on axis. Now, if you tow these speakers out away from you, it's going to bring that on axis high frequency bump more level in response, and it's going to make the overall neutrality better, in my opinion. To me, when they're pointed directly at you, they sound too bright, too thumpy, and just overall too much energy. And honestly, they are kind of fatiguing. Now at higher volumes, which is where I tend to listen, let's say around 75 to 85 decibels at about 10 feet away, this extra energy in the 2 kilohertz region for me was a bit too much. Now it wouldn't be an issue if it weren't also coupled with the fact that the mid-range of this speaker is recessed or scooped out a bit. And that tends to make any vocal, male or female, just a little bit hollow. When you have this combined with a peaking around 2K and then also a dip around 4K, it makes this 2K stand out even more and call more attention to itself than I would personally like. Now the bump around 100 hertz is kind of nice. You get extra mid-bass thump, but for me, it's a little bit too much. If you've watched my previous reviews, you know that I like a little bit of extra thump around 100 to 120 hertz. With a level of about maybe 1 to 2 decibels. It gives it just a little bit of flavor, and I'm cool with that. In this speaker, it's about 3 to 5 decibels, which in my opinion, again, a bit too much for what I'm looking for. If you listen to these speakers in a standard room with sidewall reflections, then what you're going to notice is the speaker is bright, regardless of if you have it towed on axis or off axis away, pointing directly out into the room. Now, if you don't have sidewall reflections, or maybe the sidewalls are really far away, then those early reflections that have a different timbre to the response than the direct sound that you get are going to make the speaker sound less bright. So what I would recommend if you're looking at these speakers is to absorb the sidewall reflections. Get you some 2-inch, maybe even 4-inch absorption panels. Put these absorption panels at the first reflection point, and that will absorb some of that lower high frequency area, upper mid-range area. That'll bring down some of that energy, and that for me was what really kind of makes the difference here. I do also recommend towing these out so they're facing directly out into the room. The base extension on these, I would say, is going to be about 60 hertz for most rooms. Now, obviously, your room modes are going to cause different bass response, but I would say that 60 hertz is probably what you can reasonably expect. At high output volumes, however, this bass response drops some. So we'll talk about that and the compression data a little bit further on. The soundstage of the speaker, to me, is kind of that sweet spot, about plus or minus 60 degrees. Too much wider than that, soundstage becomes diffuse. More narrow than that, there's not a lot of enveloping character to it. The drive units here are some of my favorite. ScanSpeak Revelator midwoofer and a ScanSpeak tweeter. Now, I have a soft spot in my heart for the ScanSpeak Revelator woofer. Used to use them in my car audio system all the time. It's one of my favorite drive units. However, it's not without its faults. It does have some resonance in the midwoofer itself that I'm going to discuss in the data shortly. And from this resonance, there's a bit more higher second order distortion than maybe one would say for a superb drive unit of these days. But that particular drive unit, I'm ballparking, it's at least 15 years old, maybe 20 years old, if not older at this point. But still, it's one of my personal favorites. Sound clip. Now, what you're listening for here is the difference between the original pink noise and the modified pink noise with the speaker overlaid on it. You're not looking for absolute accuracy out of your speakers or your headphones that you're listening to. You're listening for the relative difference between these two sets of sounds. The more different the speaker version is, the less accurate in response it is. Now, I'm going to be showing you the 30 degrees response because that's how I recommend the speaker be listened to. So let's talk about the data real fast. All the data that you're about to see is captured using the Clipple near-field scanner. It is a state-of-the-art robotic device that allows me to get anechoic data in a non-anechoic environment, which helps us understand what the speaker is doing before we put it in the room. And that makes things easier when we're shopping and comparing, especially when you have an idea of what you're after and you know how that speaker measures. And this is what you heard. So measured SPL of about 83 decibels. The linearity of the speaker when towed off axis is within about plus or minus 3 decibels or so. But here's the thing. The mid-range scoop, the peaking around 2K, followed by the scoop around 2 to maybe 7K or so. Those characteristics of the speaker cause it to stand out in some ways that you might like. But for me, it's a little bit too non-neutral for me to really enjoy it for long listening sessions. Now, if we want to talk about the on-axis response, here's the CTA 2034 data set. And then if we go to the 30 degrees response, this is the difference. So you can see that directly on axis, this mid-range dip is definitely more noticeable. The accentuation of 2K, so that extra attack and energy, is definitely more noticeable. And this dip around 3 to 4 kilohertz is definitely more noticeable. And this is why I recommend that you listen to these speakers 30 degrees off axis. Estimated in-room response and kind of how I heard the speaker. Again, in-room extension to about 60 hertz, 3 to 5 decibel bass bump, recessed vocals, added attack, and then the lifted high frequency on axis. Burst decay shows some resonance around 5, 6, 7, 800 hertz. It's either in the woofer or the cabinet, but most likely both. If you look at the raw woofer response, and this is taken from the manufacturer's website, you can see that there's some woofer resonance through this area of about 600 to about 1 kilohertz. This is most likely surround to cone edge resonance, where the cone edge and the surround are kind of operating out of sync. That creates a resonance, and that usually shows up as high second order distortion and a dip directly on axis in most cases. Contour plot shows about plus or minus 60 to 70 degrees of horizontal radiation. Notice that there is some ballooning effect. This is why I say that sidewall absorption will be helpful, because it would linearize this and make the speaker sound more smooth and neutral overall in your room once you absorb this extra energy. Now, you may like it, but for me, I would definitely add absorption. Vertical window, you're looking at about maybe 20, plus minus 20, plus or minus 10 degrees. There's not a lot of wiggle room directly at the tweeter. It's worth noting that the baffle is curved and my reference point is at the tweeter. If I took the microphone or if I listened above the tweeter to basically line up my ears at that angle, then what I tended to find was that there's more of a suck out in the upper mid-range and tweeter level. So these speakers really do sound best if they're positioned in line with your ear and not necessarily angled up. So you don't want to put your ear relative to the angle. You just want to keep your ears on the same level as the tweeter, okay? This graphic shows us the energy radiated throughout the speaker toward the front and toward the back and then the side. So we're looking at a bird's eye view. The red is the higher area of energy. And generally when I look at this plot, I'm looking for higher energy toward the side and toward the back. If there is none, that usually indicates that the enclosure is rock solid or that there's no port resonance. In this case, however, we can see a couple things going on. We have some higher energy around 650 hertz toward the back, some side energy around maybe 700 hertz as well. So this kind of shores up what we saw with the burst decay, the extended resonance time of what looks like it's going to be side panel resonance and potentially other resonances that might be leaking out of the rear port. I will note, when I plugged the port, I was still getting some resonance, and this we know is from the woofer itself. Harmonic distortion at 86 decibels and then at 96 decibels. Here's your higher second order distortion. Hi-Fi Compass, a great website for just raw drive unit measurements, has measured this woofer, and we see that they show a same thing, higher second order distortion. Multitone distortion shows us additional distortion in that same region. So this is the woofer itself causing this issue. Cross it at 80 hertz, you're still going to have higher mid-range distortion. Compression looks good, about 95, 96 decibels, which is pretty good. If you start going above this, you're going to start running into some linearity issues. Instantaneous compression shows us that. So when we go from 96 decibels up to 102 decibels, we start losing some bass control. That's really going to change your sense of tack and dynamics as well. And the impedance also shows us this resonance as well. The overall impedance is about 4.4 ohm minimum. And if you're driving this with an AB amplifier, you'll make sure that you have plenty of power. Otherwise, you may run into some heat issues long term. Overall, I like the looks of the speaker. Towed on axis, no go. Towed off axis, much better. Sidewall panel absorption, absolutely recommended, at least in my opinion. With the 83 decibel sensitivity and the 4 ohm load, you're going to need a good, powerful amplifier to drive these to higher output volume. So just keep that in mind. And that does it for this review. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please let me know in the comment section below. Pylon, and I believe that's how it's pronounced, did send these out to me on loan to review, but I was not paid or any of that other stuff. The only money that I ever make from my videos are from you guys watching it, patreon.com/Erin's Audio Corner support, or you using any of my generic affiliate links, which you can use to buy anything you want from any of these stores listed in the description section below. I really appreciate you watching, and man, I butchered that. Appreciate. I'm leaving it. I hope you all have a good day. Take care. Peace.